Hi, I'm Lori Jones, and this is StrategyCast, where smart marketers and bold business thinkers share the plays behind brand breakthroughs. Do you know how most product launches feel like sprints? Today, we're flipping the script and looking at innovation as a marathon. My guest is Stephen White, a strategic leader behind some of the most compelling beverage brand launches you've seen, and yes, including Captain Morgan. We'll dive into how he and his team build flavor-forward innovations that win this season and position the portfolio for long-term brand relevance in what they refer to as strategic innovation cycles. We'll start with the strategy-first mindset that drives their approach.
A competitive edge starts with strategy, and strategy starts with knowing how to develop one. StrategyCast is a leading marketing podcast that serves up strategic insights, trends, and tips to help separate your business from the pack. Tune in weekly as host Lori Jones interviews bold marketing leaders who have priceless wisdom and are willing to share. Each episode explores cutting-edge approaches that have proven instrumental in transforming brands into industry trailblazers.
Welcome to the show, Stephen.
Hi, Laurie.
It is so great to have you here to talk about libations.
It's an easy topic. It's a hobby and a passion.
Yeah, it really is. I just love it. And you've got such an incredible background. Before we really dive into educating our incredible audience and listeners today, tell us a little bit more about what you've been up to and the background that got you to where you are today.
Sure. I think just rolled through 21 years at Diageo, a brilliant business to be part of. A great stable of brands, Johnny Walker, Crown Royal, Bullet. Just wonderful brands to work with. I joined in innovation 21 years ago and then had a lovely journey through global marketing director, global CMO type roles, ended up running breweries in Africa. Just wonderful kind of experience with the business. And then about 7 years ago, came back in to run innovation for Africa and Europe. And then about 18 months ago, moved over to the US to pick up running our North America innovation team, which is a big powerhouse part of our business.
I love it. And I recognize that East Coast vibe that you've got going on too.
Yes. Yeah. So based up in Connecticut, up in that lovely part of the country.
That's great. So I'm interested, you took on innovation roles like 20 plus years ago, which to me was very like early forward thinking for especially CPG brands. What was it that you thought was so interesting at that time? And you were really a kind of a trailblazer for that kind of a title.
Yeah, I've been working in the healthcare industry in brand marketing and commercial, and somebody picked up the phone and said, "Do you fancy joining this company called Diageo? They're setting up a big innovation team." And I was like, "What's innovation?" Yeah. And they kind of explained what their ambition was and where they were on that journey. And it was like, I definitely want to be part of this business and of this function as it formed. And I think you're right. There were a few of our peer CPG groups who were playing around with innovation, but actually in the drinks industry, nobody was doing it. So, new product development was an R&D function. It wasn't part of a consumer-facing function. And that was the big change that Diageo brought through, as a real consumer-first innovation team.
Well, and I tell you, the team and you are doing an incredible job with just that strategy-first innovation. And you believe, and we've talked about this before, that innovation must be rooted in the business strategy to really gain and earn buy-in. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Yeah, so look, Diageo's 200 brands, we operate in 160 countries. To add anything new to that mix runs the risk of distracting the core business from doing its kind of day job. And so we have always taken the opportunity to think about consumer opportunities and where the consumers are going next, and thinking about how that might benefit Diageo or maybe even disadvantage Diageo. We use that to inform the strategic choices that the business is making. So where could one of our brands stretch next? Or if we don't have a brand at all in that place, how might we go after that opportunity? But we do it in a way that is aligned to the longer term objectives of the business. We know we're fairly clear around what it is we're trying to do. We're a big premium drinks business. We want to grow in those key categories. And so we use that lens to make sure we're picking off the right bits of innovation, that kind of glorious synergy of where our business wants to be, where the consumer wants to be, and actually where our customers also want to kind of focus in and spend their time investing.
There's so many great insights there. And I think a lot of marketers today are having conversations with board of directors and CEOs that are truly only revenue driven. They're not looking at geography. Well, they probably are, but not truly market penetration. And, are we saturated in a market, or what can we do to grow in other areas that are driven by consumer? In essence, these people are truly driven by revenue.
Yeah.
Those are tough discussions as a marketer to say, I don't think the business strategy that you've defined is achievable with the marketing goals that you've also outlined, let alone the budget. What advice can you provide to our listeners today on how to have those tough conversations and actually understand that the business strategy isn't right?
Yeah, and it's and in many cases, it's a combination of the business strategy needing to evolve. So it's kind of the direction of travel of the business is clear, but actually the tools that are in the toolbox don't get you all the way there. So it's looking at how you might add some more tools into that toolbox to achieve that objective. At times, it's also highlighting when you've got big, significant consumer change happening. That's the opportunity to come back and have a look at whether the strategy is right. For a long while, Diageo had been very focused as a business around our alcoholic portfolio, with a view that non-alcoholic brands were kind of small, not as interesting. We revised that as a business maybe 7 or 8 years ago now to say, actually, there's a big role that non-alcoholic brands can play. And we went hard into that. And that was based upon genuine consumer insight and opportunity, but also some belief from some of those exec and board members who also shared the passion, could see what's happening. And you do need that bit of allyship, because inherently businesses like repeating what they've done before. That's how they know they can make money. The moment you stretch into new territories, it feels like it's a risk. It's introducing uncertainty, and you need to therefore drive a change. So to drive that change requires belief and connection at the top of the business as much as through the chain of it as well.
It's interesting. I'm having a bit of an epiphany as you're explaining all this right now, because quite often we talk about a business problem, right? But the business opportunity, I think, is sometimes even more important. In this situation, you didn't really have a problem. You saw an opportunity to fulfill a business goal to increase revenue, and it happened to be a non-alcoholic. There's a big juxtaposition between what is our problem versus what is our opportunity.
Absolutely. And they're always, anyways, they're two sides of the same coin, aren't they? So the threat itself, if it materialized, so non-alcoholic brands coming through, could have undermined our position over time. But the fact that we were able to carry a number of our key trademarks into non-alcoholic, and the consumer values them, they really appreciate the fact that we've shown up in those spaces, means that there's a revenue opportunity there that's completely fresh to us. Yeah. The one bit I would say about, I talk to my peers in other businesses, within drinks and otherwise. One of the things that I think helps a business like Diageo is we have products that take 12, 15, 20 years to mature. Yep. We have a whiskey which takes time to mature. And the whiskey that you're drinking in your hand, a lovely Johnnie Walker Black Label, somebody had the foresight to lay that down 12 years ago, so that it would be exactly right for you then. And that longevity of thought and our sense of building on the kind of shoulders of the forefathers who created our brands previously does mean we tend to play the longer game. When we're at our best, we play that longer game really well. Yeah. But that doesn't mean that we're off the hook for the short-term revenue delivery. And we're always going to have to, play within our trademarks to kind of flex and meet some of the shorter term changes and needs of the business. But we also don't want to sacrifice the long term while we're doing that.
Yeah, I'm giggling inside because I've never, ever been afforded an opportunity for a 15-year product launch.
Yeah, look, I'm grateful for some of my forebears who laid stuff down. It's like, how did you guess we would need that? As brilliant. Yeah. And hopefully we're doing the same for the next generation coming through as well.
What fun. I love it. So let's take some of this philosophy here and talk about it and dive into really how it shows up in practice, starting with what you refer to as full concept generation. First of all, define that for us, if you will, and then how it's utilized within the organization.
Yeah. So we really start kind of from consumer insight opportunity out. So we always start with a clear view as to who we're going after. We do it in a way that means that we're not tied necessarily to a specific answer. We're agnostic as to how we might best meet that consumer's need, which means that we're looking therefore the different ways that we can play our different brand assets, create something new, our R&D teams, the kind of work that they're working on. And what we're trying to do is get that lovely bit of coherency between a consumer insight being brilliantly answered by a product proposition, a liquid, a pack in our case, maybe a service or an experience that goes alongside that. And then carrying that all the way through into the way that we bring that to life at the point that the product touches the consumer. So in our case, the bar or restaurant you're choosing to order it in, or the bottle you're choosing to take home with you after a visit to the stores. And we, as we create our ideas, we are always thinking about how we bring those products to life. When we've got an existing trademark, so a Johnny Walker or a Captain Morgan, it's kind of how is it going to work in the world that Captain Morgan or Johnny Walker have created? How does this brand, this variant live within there? In the case of new to world, when we're experimenting new to world, we're thinking about who might talk about this product, who might be the first people to drink it, how might they share it onwards. So we're really thinking about how we create the total package that comes together, which means that there's a stickiness to the idea that kind of carries through. And again, coming back to that 200 brands, we don't lack investment choices in our business. And so we are looking with any of our ideas to make sure there's a stickiness to them, that they'll actually, will invest well, but they'll also generate their own noise simply because they're distinctive propositions.
It's interesting, whiskey is definitely tied into, 15-year, as a quality marker, right? And I think what's interesting there is the change in consumer insights and habit during the time. And probably whiskey's not a great example, but with some of these long tail product launches, how do you make sure that the time is truly going to create the value needed for it to resonate with the client or with the consumer?
Yeah. There's a fair amount of anticipation of where the consumer's going to go. So we do quite a bit of what we call foresight work. So thinking about the future direction of the consumer, what's happening in their world and where they might go. That helps us think about what might be happening in that period. The nature of a number of our categories means that we can lay down a spectrum of choices. So the great thing with certainly blended whiskey is you can lay down some different flavor profiles. So we've got some very unique tropical flavor casks which were laid down a while back. They're helping us think about how we might answer tropical flavors as consumers come into that space. So it allows us to kind of anticipate some of those. What we also do is have other methods that we can impact the way that the flavor products come to life in the final years of before the comes to life. So the way we finish a product, the way that we kind of blend it together, how we actually create those final product on whiskies, as an example, then we're able to kind of meet that need and fine tune it in the last stages of it. Obviously, not all of our products are 15 years. We've got likes of vodka, which are much shorter term turnarounds. We're able to be much more agile in those categories because we're able to respond closer in. So we play the kind of gambit of choice as we look at the opportunities.
Well, and you bring up tropical, and I like to dissect this a little bit because seemingly you'd serve tropical in a tropical market. But I'm in Colorado and, on a cold, snowy, not morning, evening, I might want something tropical. So how do you really determine the best market with the best, the best flavor, and how does it change by geography?
Yeah, so it's a very good question. So we do a lot of and we work very closely with our flavor houses who are also heavily invested in this. We do a lot of flavor tracking. So we look at what are emerging flavors, whether that's in food, in other aspects of drink. So we're looking at all of those kind of areas as indicators of where the consumer might go. We also look at, candidly, what manufacturers are pushing, because we shape choice as well by what we put in the market. That allows us to get a read as to what might come next. And then we are able to cut that down a level beneath that and see what's popping in terms of geographies, kind of West Coast, East Coast, the US, what's kind of hot and tricking. What we're also able to see, and I think more consistently in some of the younger generations now, is that those flavor choices travel quicker around the country than they used to. The advent of TikTok, Insta, all of those things just feed hot new ideas.
Yeah.
Across the country. So we do a lot of social listening just to see what's kind of moving, how the energy is. And we're typically working 18 months to 2 years out on the shorter term flavor trend. So we're able to kind of anticipate where the opportunities are going to pop in the next couple of years. The other big thing is obviously demographic changes. The rise of Mexican culture in the US, flavors, those kind of flavors has been coming for a while now. We were early with introducing a product like Smirnoff Tamarind into kind of capturing that space, and lots of other people following into there now. But you can see that kind of influx of culture kind of coming through as well. That helps drive some of those choices.
How much do you think it is, and do you have a specific goal around establishing trend versus being a fast follower?
Yeah, that's a live and very good question. Yeah, and I think we play both games, and so
everyone does. Yeah,
we have to. So I think that there's certain areas where we feel we've got an opportunity to lead and create the category, and that might be different types of drink within a specific category. So opening up new designations or new flavor territories. But equally, the stuff that pops up that we didn't anticipate that suddenly becomes hot because Starbucks have decided to talk about it, or somebody else outside of the alcohol categories kind of made it hot, and therefore we need to be able to react to those. So we kind of run on both short, medium, and long-term cycles in terms of thinking about how to plan our innovation, and we always leave a bit of our resource to deal with some of the short-term pieces. At times, it's quite hard to pick out what's short-term, what actually might be mid or long term. So some of those flavor plays, when you first look at it, is like, that's interesting. Is that just like a 12-month, 18-month cycle, or is that actually the start of a new move? And so you want to be playing with it so that you're able to work out if it's going to become a big thing further out, and therefore you've got a foot in the camp and going. So we're never ashamed to be a follower. We always, when we do follow, we always want to offer something different or distinct from what's being played in the market. So find that point of difference. We don't want to be too far away from those trends, because actually if they've got momentum and we're too much of a right angle to that trend, then you don't access the opportunity, you kind of confuse the consumer. But we do try and find an angle that allows us to be more distinct if we're following.
What was one of the most fun or exciting trend-setting, maybe surprises that you worked on?
Yeah, I mean, I think Smirnoff Tamarind, candidly, would be that. Developed by our team in Mexico to meet a distinct opportunity down there, a nostalgia flavor tamarind that kind of reminded people in their 30s and 40s of a sweet that they used to have as a child, as a kid growing up. And so that flavor profile we brought back into Mexico to meet that need, and did brilliantly down there. We thought, well, it's done really well down there. There's a large influx of Mexican taste into the US. Let's target those people, consumers. And we thought it would be a smallish, targeted opportunity. What we saw is that Mexican flavor permeates a lot of demographics in the US. And so it kind of exploded well out of our expectations, and actually gave us a lot of confidence for playing wider, in the flavor territories than we would have done. The usual flavors, the berries, the oranges, that's all kind of easy. These things which are spicier and a little bit more challenging, you kind of like on the first pass, and the screener might not get as high a score, but what you do find is that it has a powerful group of advocates, and those advocates act on your behalf to kind of share that story and share that flavor with their friends, and suddenly it runs away as people adopt a new taste.
As you're explaining all this, I'm thinking, about craft beer and Coca-Cola flavors and coffee flavors. And we as a society right now, and it's been this way for at least a decade or two, always are trying to find something new from a taste standpoint.
Yeah.
And how much of your planning goes into new versus the staple of the tried and true, if you will?
Yeah. So, I mean, in a lot of our categories, we've played in tried and true and have a good piece of history around what operates in there. So we are able to take a twist on the what's gone before. So strawberry lemonade is a twist on lemonade, for instance. So we do play that because, again, they're big important volume pools for consumers. They like those flavors. They want those flavors. And so I think you'd be remiss when you're looking at your product choices, your product portfolio, not to make sure you've got some of that base covered. But looking at how you can, again, that distinctivity point, what can you do to that lifts it, does something different with it? Is there another unique rising flavor that you might add in, a yuzu or something else, a guava that might just elevate that proposition into feeling like it's not only servicing that flavor I know, but kind of adding a bit of adventure into the flavor itself as well.
How much of that do you feel creates longer term brand loyalty for the overarching brand itself?
I think, yeah, it's an interesting one. We as a business, we used to talk a lot about loyalty. So we were big advocates of kind of adorer definitions. We've got trademarks like Guinness, which do have a strong following base. We've kind of liberated ourselves a little bit from that to think more about recruitment, constantly recruiting.
Those first timers.
Not even first timers, even people who've chosen us before.
Printers. Yeah.
Yeah, because even in categories in which you would say consumers are loyal, the reality is they have a basket of goods that a basket of brands that are perfectly acceptable and they're choosing from. And therefore, we need to make sure that they're excited or engaged about the choice they're making. And so when we are thinking about innovations, we are making sure that we're doing things that feel distinct to them. So that it feels like it's a good choice to make. It's a positive choice. There's something good about it. And I think that's actually helped us as a business never take for granted what we've already got. It always makes us look for, we've got to continue to evolve and delight the consumers. That's particularly true when you've got very competitive markets, so everybody's trying to find a niche or a gap. And actually, if we sat back and didn't proactively lead into that, we'd create space for our competitors to operate. My
husband is from Ireland, and he had his first Guinness in Portrush, Northern Ireland. And we've often debated, quote unquote, why it tastes so much better in Ireland than it does anywhere else in the world. And we do think it's the salt air.
Yeah, there's definitely something about being in Ireland in a slightly damper condition that a lovely pint of Guinness warms in a different way, 100%. I can firmly advocate there's some fantastic Guinness outlets in the US. I've enjoyed finding them while I've been living here. But yeah, you're right. There's a pint in Ireland, a pint particularly near the brewery is always a bit special.
Unbelievable. We just go to the East Coast to drink our Guinness.
There you go.
Oh, okay. So you also have this concept of short, mid, and long-term innovation cycles. We've touched on it briefly, but I want to dive into it a little bit more deeply here. How do you define whether or not something is short, mid, and long-term within your space? I mean, we talked about trend a little bit, but you never know that, if that could turn into something longer term. So how do you really cut that and break it down?
Yeah. So I think the short-term pieces are typically tend to rise quicker. So the things that tend to rise quicker, so flavors that become hot, it becomes a talking point very quickly, and they tend to have a shorter lifetime. They decay quite quickly, so they kind of pop and drop. And so a lot of flavor and fashion areas play into that space. And so we kind of look at those, and we're trying to anticipate what's coming next. So as we said, we talked to our flavor houses, our culture experts. We're trying to predict a few of those shorter term pieces and trying to actually cross correlate. You're looking for 3 or 4 things that are operating in a similar area that tell you that it's going to get a scale moment. It's going to have an urge to pop. That allows us to treat those short term pieces with the right kind of innovation, the right kind of business model. So it's not going to be there forever. You don't overinvest, but you want to ride that wave while it's hot. So you want to be part of the cultural moment. You want to be locked into the key channels that are driving that, and you want a product that kind of perfectly mirrors that. Our midterm areas tend to be occasion-driven changes. So the one that we talk about a fair bit at the moment is, and this, I would say this is verging on a 10-year piece, but the rise of daytime drinking and the decline of late night drinking. Those two things have kind of happened together. So the drinking occasion has changed. And your needs in a late night occasion are very different from those in a daytime drinking occasion. Oh. And so that daytime drinking occasion, typically a group occasion, there's a sense of community and connection. So people are looking to potentially order a round of drinks together that feel similar. They're looking for a bit of liveliness and energy in that moment, but also a degree of sophistication. And that's why you've seen the rise of things like spritzes come to life, those big colorful spritzes, big glasses, ice, because you're outside and you don't want your drink to get too hot. All of those things have kind of come through that occasion. And that's been rising for a while, but that's a kind of midterm trend.
Do you think, just staying on that for a second, was that rising before COVID, or did COVID had something to do with that?
That's a good question. COVID definitely accelerated some of that, but it was rising before, and we could see it in multiple markets in the world. So Europe, it had been coming for a while. We could see it happening through the UK, through bits of Asia, and on the edges in the US, it was starting to happen. And so it's kind of interesting that, the dynamics of no longer late nights is kind of interesting to unpick. So it's kind of like the socializing used to happen later, but the consequence of that, impacting your days after, the rise of video imagery of those moments feel like they're excessive. People don't want to see that. So there's kind of a recasting of the social moments where people do want to be seen, which is living a great life in the sunshine, as we're hopefully going to be doing this weekend with a beautiful drink in our hand. They're the things that have kind of driven that occasion. I do think COVID's really interesting because it did play a disruptive role in alcohol. We saw, clearly nobody's in a bar, everybody's at home. The choices for entertainment and what you would spend your money on became narrower. We saw people choose to drink a lot better at home. So they would tend to buy more expensive drinks because they won't necessarily buy it in a bar, but I'll buy an even better one for me to enjoy at home. We saw quite a lot of those trends coming. What we have seen is post-COVID, people wanted to socialize and see each other. So it definitely fueled this moment. So people getting out, connecting again, and showing that they're having a good time together. That definitely drove some of the occasions that we see.
And you bring the spritzer up, and the visual of a spritzer is so beautiful compared to a beer or, a rum drink that looks like a soda. And you've got to wonder if a lot of that, with the visual essence of what is so important to people, being, in the know, if you will, and just creating something that's prettier, to be blunt, is something that's meaningful.
I think it did two things. Genuinely, the addition of ice also made sure it stayed colder for longer. So you have a more refreshing, longer drink because over time the ice also melts. You end up with more volume, but it's kind of diluting some of the alcohol impact. And then you're right, a visually beautiful drink that kind of makes you feel good. It's manifest.
Yeah. That's great. Okay, let's not forget long-term here.
Yes. So long tends to be bigger societal trends for us. So they would be some of the bigger demographic moves. So population shifts in the non-alc example that we gave before. We'd seen that non-alcoholic choices, that sense of wanting to moderate alcohol consumption, making better choices in the moment, but also the dissatisfaction of existing non-alc offers, whether that's a soda or whatever. That trend was there, and we could see that beginning to accelerate over the period. So that big societal piece, and then we see things like societal moves around Gen Z coming through, how they're likely to socialize longer term. What will that have as an impact for the industry? But also the aging demographic population we have as well. What choices will they make? And so they're the things that play into our longer term trends and where we're looking for.
How do you balance the short term and long term?
Yeah, you've got to be around for the long term. That's the key. So the short term stuff needs to work. And obviously the short term delivery is always a balance of what you did 10 years ago on the long term stuff, what you did 5 years ago, and the medium term stuff, and then the short term pieces. So hopefully you've got a wealth of activities that are coming through. It's not just the short term things that you're coming up with right in that moment. So you get that kind of beautiful kind of correlation of the three coming together. But we're not let off the hook. We need to deliver in the short term. We need to be good in those moments to be able to invest in the way that we want to do on the longer term pieces.
I cannot imagine what your corporate product matrix looks like.
It's pretty challenging at times.
It's going to be like a whole wall.
It's and to be honest, we're blessed with Diageo is a great place to work. I'll do that to everybody out there. If you ever get the chance, wonderful business.
Yeah.
And partly for that, we have a lot of people who've been around and have long service in the business, particularly in some key functions. So our research and development, our science and technology group, our consumer insight groups tend to have been around for a long time, which means that they've got that lively institutional knowledge that you're able to constantly tap into. And they help us play the matrix brilliantly, because without that kind of knowledge, now I'm sure in the future world, AI will solve all of that for us. But right now, we need those kind of experts in the business.
It's always going to take human interaction, isn't it?
100%.
One of the so many things interested me about bringing you onto the show, but one of the things that stopped me in my track was the launch of Captain Morgan Sweet Chili Lime and the campaign around that, which I think is so brilliant. Explain that to us, if you will, and how you really took a lot of the principles from innovation and applied it to that Captain Morgan launch.
Yeah. So again, kind of a midterm trend, rise of spicy in there. So we've seen the rise of spicy coming for a little while. We played with it with tamarind. We played with a few other products, and you can see it in the tequila category. Spicy margaritas has been around for a little while. So there was a very clear rise in spicy, and Captain is a spiced. The original Captain Morgan is a spiced gold, so it's a spiced rum, but actually on the milder end of that. And so we could see that, one, we had the right to go play in Sweet Chili Lime as a territory, but we needed to find a fresh way into that. And we did a lot of immersive work with the target audience, actually co-creating with them, playing with them, with the products, getting them to experience it. And Sweet Chili Lime rose to the top as the idea that kind of best captured what they're after: sense of fun, energy, but also taste desire. So I want to try that. I want to try it. And that energy and excitement is what the brand team then carried through into the comms. So the fact that we've done all that work face to face with the consumers gave it a really good feel for what was going to make it exciting. And that's how the marketing team really brought it to life, kind of leveraging that sense of fun, playfulness, energy, and owning that flavor. Really kind of celebrating that flavor in all of the touch points that we use.
There's just so many, millions of different touch points at play here. How do you, and a lot of this has got, a lot of it's experience, a lot of it's numbers, but sometimes you just have to say, we need to continue on. If you've got a product that you know is right for the market and it's just moving slowly and it's not taking off as quickly as it should, what kind of discussions are you having internally? Is it marketing? Is it positioning? Is it geography? Is it the age? I mean, there's so many different factors. And then maybe an example of where you've had those conversations and then you just gave it a little bit more oomph and it took off.
Yeah. Look, we've it's a live conversation. So we review post-launch, we're in a kind of constant learning review phase. Some of the things we're more confident around, so we're scaling up big from the start, and we're going for it. There are others where we kind of think there's something here.
Yeah.
We're taking a risk, and we'll tend to kind of manage that risk a little bit. So we'll launch it in a test market, or we'll launch it in a smaller geography, and we're looking for people on the street, so our teams on the street, looking at how the consumers are interacting with the product to try and understand what's working, what's not working in there. So getting in the weeds of genuinely, is there something here? The red flag is always if the consumer doesn't get it. If they just don't get it, they don't like the flavor, or they just don't understand it, then you've got a kind of go back to the desk and have a proper look at where we go. Sometimes we find it's in the marketing or the communication, or we're just not kind of cutting through. And sometimes it's a scale thing. We just need to create more noise around this to kind of amplify and go. And the answers to solving the performance side of things kind of driven by what insights we generate out of it. We have had, I was blessed working in Africa, which is, so I ran the innovation teams for Africa. We had a product in there called Origin, which is this wonderful herbal gin product, herbal spirit product. And we launched it in 2 markets, but it hadn't quite worked. It was 2 test markets. It hadn't quite worked in either, but there was enough in there. There was just like enough to kind of go, it's almost right. It's almost right. And actually, we took them out of the markets before there was any scar tissue, because once the scar tissue builds up in the market, like, this thing is never going to work. It's like, oh, it's almost right, but it's not quite right. So we're better off actually just retrenching it. We launched it into Nigeria about 10, 12 years ago now, and it became the biggest drinks launch in Africa in that one market. So that one market alone and it was just playing with the formulation and the way that we talked about it that suddenly set it alight. And it took a lot of resilience from the team to keep coming back and kind of go, I believe this thing is right. What it also took was some broad-shouldered leadership of our regional president who was running that region at the time, to just kind of say, I trust these guys. They think that's something. I'm going to let them keep going.
Which is awesome. Awesome leadership.
Yeah.
How do you think in this situation it was more geography, more messaging, more timing, or more ingredient?
So it was the balance of the liquid wasn't quite right. So you drink it, but you wouldn't necessarily fancy a second one. And so we kind of went back to the formula, because they loved the first taste of it, but by the time you'd finished that first drink, it was like, that's enough.
Yeah.
And so what we worked on was the formulation to get that second piece. We then overlaid it with culture, and it was culture that then accelerated it. And so we worked out really a narrative about what the herbs would bring in terms of your occasion and how you feel going into those occasions, that really lifted the whole proposition. And it just took off, that kind of sweet spot of the right liquid, right proposition, and then a cultural kind of amplifier that carried it.
An adjacent parallel here, which sounds like a bit of an oxymoron. Years ago, we launched a brand by the name of E Street Realty, which is today's Zillow and today's Realtor. They were probably 15 years ahead of their time. The market was not ready to buy and look at real estate online. Everything was truly in person. So there are brands that stand the test of time. There are brands that are ahead of their time, and they can't get the launch right because the market is not ready. How often do you see that particular example happening with the spirit, where it's a good product, the market's not ready, you're just going to put it on the shelf and wait for the cues and then relaunch it?
Yeah, it happens a lot, and we've had a few of those in Diageo, particularly North America, so predating me in the role, where the team had predicted things like the rise of seltzers 5 years before seltzers happened, the rise of espresso martinis before they'd happened, and the right products launched and then put away. So it's keeping that back shelf conversation running and looking at it is definitely an art. I don't think we're I don't think we've necessarily got it completely cracked either. So it's a challenge actually, just to kind of either stimulate the change earlier. So trying to work out, do you invest to create it? But then actually the patience to wait is quite hard. It's quite hard.
Yeah, I was not waiting for bell bottoms to come back, but I do love them again. A couple final questions here. I think I want to dive into just one more timing question, because people expect immediate results, and all they really need immediate are like clues, right? And you know, it takes a brand 2 to 3 years to establish itself if it's something brand new. And we work with a lot of young, you know, innovative brands. And they're looking at something, you know, 3 months out, 6 months out. And measuring brand health can be something that's incredibly difficult. What advice do you have for audiences out there in handling conversations with the C-suite, with investors, you know, with peers about timing and just how long something should take to be successful?
Yeah. I mean, our industry is famous for its 10-year overnight successes. So, you know, we quite often look at a brand and go, wow, they've got big really quickly. And then you look back at their inception and they were 10, 15 years in the making. And so there is a longevity required to get there. I think what we're looking for in those first stages is at least consumer stickiness. So an idea that consumers like, engage with, find distinct, and find a role for in their life. So that kind of meaningfulness, distinctivity. If consumers are telling you that, there's a good chance you're into the right space. And alongside that is a bit of belief through a couple of other stakeholders in the mix. So for us, our bartending communities are quite important. If our bartenders are telling us they like this, or they're seeing people like it, that's an important influencer for us. Similarly, some of our key customers. So if they're saying, actually, we kind of see something here, something's happening, then that also just helps reinforce it. And so there is a tendency to fall back to data alone, to kind of say, yeah, we're hitting, I don't know, 5 cases per outlet. That's kind of part of the information, but the insight is actually more around how the consumer are interacting with it and being able to bring that to life for your stakeholders. And then I think, you know, the piece that we're working on, and I know is the same for startup businesses, smaller businesses, is finding the first neighborhood or the first region or the first area that it begins to come to life. And if it hasn't come to life in a specific region or an area, the chances of it then being able to catalyze across lots of spaces is probably very low. But if you've got an area where people are passionate about it, then the chances are you're going to be able to replicate that in multiple towns, cities, regions. And that is the selling story, I think, for the internal and the external stakeholders is, you know, there's something here that people care about, and there's enough scale in the places where we've chosen to kind of build it.
Yeah, that's great. Reflecting on everything that we've talked about today, we launched a Better At series this year to help marketers sharpen their everyday skills and make a big difference. Things like listening, collaborating, prioritizing, communicating rather, with impact. What's one thing that you've learned to be better at that's made a measurable difference in how you lead work or show up in your role?
Yeah, so I guess 2. I'm gonna take 2. So apologies. So I think the first is, and look, this is the world of innovation specifically, is not overly falling in love with your own ideas. So as you become more experienced, as you become more senior in the businesses, your job is not to get your idea through. Your job is to get the best idea through. And wherever that comes from, however it comes to life, your job is to make sure that that rises to the top and then is nurtured through the organization. And that requires a little bit of the ego coming out of the way to make that happen. The second piece, and again, innovation specific here, but it would be true in marketing roles as well, is is resilience is a underrated capability. We're a very successful innovation business in Diageo, but we do have our number of failures as well. And you've got to be able to take them, because if you can't take them, it takes an emotional toll on you that's pretty hard. And so that sense of like, nope, it's good, dust yourself off, go again, is really important for successful and innovators, and I would suspect entrepreneurs.
Yeah, we need to remind ourselves about that every minute of every day. There's no doubt about it. Stephen, it has been an incredible discussion that we've had today. What is the best way for our audience to get in touch with you?
I'm out there on LinkedIn. That's the social media choice for me. So, yeah.
That's great. Well, thank you so much for your appearance on StrategyCast. And if you'd like to get a hold of me, please contact me, Lori, at StrategyCast.com. Stephen, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you again.
Thank you, Lori.
That's a wrap. Thanks for joining us on today's show. We hope your strategic brains are spinning with new ideas and bold inspiration that will elevate your strategies and marketing know-how.